Hi, everyone. It's a great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Arpita Patra. She is the organizer of this workshop, so she asked me to introduce her. Arpita is an assistant professor here at IIC, and she has been working on secure multi-party computation, both from the theory and the practical sides. She has she received her PhD from IIT Madras and then pursued for a postdoc in 3 different leading labs in Europe. And she has received quite many important awards during her research career. And on the personal note, me and Arpita shared an office in Aarhus while doing our postdoc. And I remember I was very impressed by her. She came like very eager to learn about new areas in secure computation. And I'm proud to say that I was a teacher in some sense. So she has been very successful up until then and since then. And yeah, the stage is yours.
Yeah. Thank you, Kamit, for the kind introduction. Let's hope I remember my talk after going through a grueling 3 months of experience of organizing this workshop. Okay, so my talk is on the best of both worlds, multi-party computation, and this is also going to be a broad exposition of this topic, and towards the end I'm going to show you some recent results, the kind of works that happens in this domain, but that's quite towards the end, and you should be mostly focused on the first part, which is I hope you will be able to absorb everything given the background which is set by all the previous speakers. So I'm going to rely on many of the things that had been spoken in the previous 3 talks, and I'll refer to those techniques as and when required. Okay, so even before I start, what does best of both worlds in general mean, right? So it means that the best features of 2 different contrasting things. So in the current context, in the context of MPC protocols, I mean 2 different classes of protocols, distinct classes of protocols offering complementary features, and then I'll be talking about the third one, the third class of protocols, the best of the both world, right, which will combine the best features from both the worlds and give you that. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what are the 2 classes in the course of the talk. So let's start with the mandatory slide. You have already seen this 3 times. Let me repeat it 4th time. So the problem of MPC. So first of all, this is a standard bearer problem in cryptography. It allows a collection of data owners to perform a collaborative computation, right, while keeping the input private without anyone gaining any knowledge about the input of the other except what is permissible by the function output, right. Little bit in details, we consider n parties connected with each other over private and secure channel, right, and there is a centralized adversary corrupting T out of those n parties. The honest parties have absolutely no clue about the identities of the corrupt parties, right, and that's the challenge. And every party Pi has an input xi, and the goal is to compute a function f, a polynomially time computable function f on the private input of the parties, right, with the goal that of course correctness. In the end everybody would like to get the output of the function, and the other goal is privacy, meaning that nothing more than the function output should be revealed. So the security requirement of MPC has been very beautifully captured by the information obtained by the adversary in two different worlds, real world and the ideal world. In the real world, in the ideal world, okay, there is a trusted third party who all the parties can trust to, right, and all of them are connected to the trusted third party using a authenticated and private channel. So the parties send their input to the trusted third party who computes the output, the function that they would like to compute, and they send the output back to all the parties. Okay. So now, so if you look at what the adversary obtains in the ideal world, right, what is that? Basically the input and the output, right, nothing else. So that's what we call as the view of the adversary in the ideal world, view ideal, the input and the output of that party, the corrupt party. Okay. In the complementary world, in the right world, the real world, okay, the trusted third party is replaced with a protocol. It's an interactive protocol running amongst the parties, and again the parties gives the same input and input to the protocol, and in the end, so they run the interactive protocol, and in the end they get the output. And the view of the adversary in this ideal world, the real world, is called view real. And as you can see, in the view real, the adversary sees much more than that it sees in the ideal world. In the ideal world, it is just the input and the output, whereas in the real world, apart from the input and the output, the adversary gets to see many other communication. Okay. Now, this is how we will define the security of our protocol, of this protocol that we are running in the real world. So we will say that our protocol is secure, right, or it emulates, if it emulates the trusted third party or the ideal world. To be more specific, if we can design, if you are able to design a simulator, a magic algorithm that can start with the view ideal and can generate the view real, then we will say that our protocol is fine. Okay. So we start with a view ideal, which is what ideally an adversary should learn, and from there, if there is an algorithm that can take that and can spit out the view real, which the adversary is supposed to see in the real world, then we say that our protocol is secure. Okay. So this designing, coming up with MPC constructions and these simulators remains to be one of the finest areas in MPC. Okay. Finest art. So these require really artistic inclination to come up with a new protocol and designing, coming up with a corresponding simulator to prove that your protocol is secure. Okay, so I think by now you know that there are plenty of applications of MPC. I am going to just refer a few. So this, the MPC is one of the most impactful and disruptive technologies of this century that allows cryptographically secure data analysis over sensitive data, and it brings in significant social benefits in the context when data sharing is constrained or prevented by legal, ethical or privacy concerns. For instance, it had been used in the past to do secure data analysis over sensitive salary data of 10 million people in the greater Boston area to calculate pay disparity. Then it had been used to train a model on private medical data held by several sources to offer the best treatment for some disease. It had been used to compute the probability of two satellites colliding in the space for satellites which are owned by competing countries. Okay, there is privacy concern. They would not like to share the orbital information of their satellites, and still they would like to jointly compute the probability of collision of their satellites in the space. Again, MPC comes the handy way we can use that to compute probability of collision. Then it has been used to implement secure auction to find out fair price for sugar beet in Denmark. And the list continues. There are many other applications, and it is really on the go, and there are several companies that are building MPC solutions these days. Okay, now traditionally MPC had been studied under different adversarial behavior and corruption thresholds. You have already listened to this in the previous talks, but let me still repeat. So based on adversarial behavior, we have two types of adversaries, semi-honest and malicious. Okay. The semi-honest adversary would follow the protocol specification, yet it will try to learn information from the protocol transcript. So it will not deviate from the prescribed protocol. Whatever is prescribed in the protocol, it will simply follow, but it will try to learn or glean more information from the received information inside the protocol. Okay. So it's an eavesdropper or semi-honest or passive, whatever you want to call it as. The malicious adversary is the other extreme. This adversary is active in the sense that it can force the corrupt parties to behave in any arbitrary way. Can ask the corrupt parties to deviate from the protocol steps. Okay. So in this talk, I am going to focus on malicious and active adversaries. So you can always keep in your mind that we are tolerating the strongest kind of adversary, okay, malicious or active. Now as far as corruption threshold is concerned with, we have again two kinds of thresholds. First is honest majority. Here the adversary will corrupt minority of the parties. That means majority of the parties in the population that is participating in the MPC protocol are honest. Okay. So this defines one class of MPC protocols, and you have seen one such protocol in the first talk, right? The BGW is an instance of honest majority protocol. The second kind is of course dishonest majority. So you can see that out of 4 parties, 3 parties are corrupt. That's a dishonest majority. In fact, 2 parties out of 4 parties is also a dishonest majority. Okay. So here the adversary can corrupt majority of the parties. In the worst case, it can go all the way up to n-1 corruption. So all but 1 could be corrupt in this case. So as you can see, we have defined these two different settings, and they induce 2 different classes of protocols. The challenges are quite different, and therefore the nature of those 2 classes are quite complementary in nature. You need different kinds of techniques to deal with these 2 types of protocols. Okay. So these are the 2 classes of protocols that I mentioned in the beginning. Okay. Honest majority class and the dishonest majority class. Okay. In both these classes, we can consider either semi-honest or malicious adversary, but remember again that we are dealing with malicious adversary for this talk. So now here the tolerating the malicious adversary, we can aim for different kinds of securities based on degree of robustness that we want. First, the strongest one, guaranteed output delivery, or in short GOD. Okay. Here the adversary cannot prevent the honest parties from getting the output no matter what. So no matter how they are going to behave, what is their strategy, the protocol can tolerate any behavior. Okay. The adversaries, the honest parties will always, in fact everybody will always get the output. Right. So this is a very desired security notion. Everybody gets the output no matter how the corrupt parties are going to behave. In a weaker notion, which is known as fairness, this is all or none kind of security. Okay. If the adversary gets the output, then we have the guarantee that the honest parties will also get it. Right. But it can happen that none of them gets the output. Right. So that's fair. If the adversary gets, then the honest parties will get it. In fact, it's if and only if the honest parties gets the output if and only if the corrupt parties do. In a further weaker notion of security with abort, security with unanimous abort, we call it as UA, unanimous abort, right? Here, this is already unfair, meaning that the adversary can always learn the output first and then decide whether to allow the honest parties to get the output. But we will have unanimity in the sense that the honest parties will be always on the same page. Either all of them will get the output, right? All the honest parties get the output, or it may happen that none of them gets the output. That's allowed. Okay, this is unfair again because the corrupt parties may always receive the output and then decide whether to give the output to the honest parties or not. Yes, it is correct output. And the last one, which is the weakest in the set, is called security with selective abort. So so here we are going to violate the unanimity as well. Okay. So again, it's unfair. The adversaries, the corrupt parties may always receive the output and then can decide. Now they can decide whether which set of honest parties get the output and which do not. That also it can decide. So for instance, it can decide, okay, the first two honest parties get the output, whereas the third one, the middle two one, they do not get. Okay, so that's called selective abort, because here the adversary can select which are the honest parties he would allow to give the output and which. And now, so as you can see that this in the three notions that I have mentioned, okay, starting from fairness and all the way to security with selective abort, there is a possibility that the adversary can stop the honest parties from getting the output, right? Yeah.
Security with unanimous abort, there is no condition on the adversary getting the output.
No, the adversary may always get the output. It can always choose to get the output and then can decide whether to allow the honest parties to reconstruct the output or not. But there will be unanimity. Either it has to allow all the honest parties or none of the honest parties. So we can enhance all these three notions, fairness, security with unanimous abort and security with selective abort, to achieve identifiability when there is a failure. When the honest parties, some honest parties are stopped to receive the output. Okay, and by identifiability I mean that at least one on the corrupt party's identity will be revealed. Okay, there are various fine-tuned notions. The identifiability could be local, global. Okay, but let me not go into the details. But by identifiability, I mean that at least one corrupt party would get to know. At least one honest party will get to know about the identity of the other way around. One honest party will get to know about the identity of one of the corrupt parties. And as you can see, security implies from top to bottom. Guaranteed output delivery implies fairness. That implies UA, and UA implies security with abort. Right? These are all weaker security notions. Interestingly, it is known from a very classical result from 1980s that due to Cleve, that dishonest majority protocols cannot achieve fairness and guaranteed output delivery. At the very best, they can achieve security with unanimous abort, probably with identifiability. Okay. But on the other hand, if you have honest majority, then you can go all the way up to the guaranteed output delivery. Okay, so that's the advantage. So if you have majority of the parties honest in your population, then you can achieve stronger security notions like fairness and guaranteed output delivery. Okay, so let's see the big picture now. So we have talked about two classes of protocols, honest majority, dishonest majority, and the various security notions, right, based on the amount of robustness that we expect. Now let's see the big picture. Yeah, so the first class is the dishonest majority protocols. the best security that we can hope for this class of protocols are unanimous abort and selective abort, probably with identifiability as well. And you have seen such protocols in the previous talk by Peter, right? And often in this class of protocols, you are going to need a broadcast channel, which you have also seen before lunch in Ashish's talk, okay? And also there is another tool that you would need to build dishonest majority protocols tolerating active adversary. Often you need the tool of zero knowledge protocols, which will be covered by Chaya in the next talk. And then we have the complementary class of protocols, honest majority protocols, where we can achieve the security notions of guaranteed output delivery and fairness. And one such instance you have seen in the past lecture by Professor CPR. Now I am going to talk about yet another, which is very unconventional class of MPC protocols, which we call as best of both worlds. Okay. And this line of works have been introduced by Yuval and his co-authors long ago in 2006, right. So in this class of protocols, we aim to tolerate both honest majority as well as dishonest majority at the same time, and we plan to offer the best possible security in the respective walls. That is, if the adversary corrupts in a dishonest majority way, right, it corrupts majority of the parties, then we are going to get unanimous abort security, which is the best that you can achieve in this world, in that world. And if the adversary is it is constrained and it can corrupt only minority of the parties, right, then we are going to get guaranteed output delivery, which is the best that you can achieve in this world. Okay. We also look at a slightly weaker notion where we relax the security in the honest majority world from the best possible to the second best possible, guaranteed output delivery to fairness. So that is the second class of protocol that we also consider. Okay, so this is the third and unconventional class of protocols that I mentioned. So this in the first slide, best of both world, and this is what is the security goal clear of best of both world protocols. Clear? Okay. Now all these classes of protocols we typically consider in three different settings. Okay. First is so based on whether some setup is available or not. The first is a plain model where no setup is assumed, that is, you do not have to assume anything, the participants need not assume anything from the beginning, they have nothing, they just come with a clean mind and then just participate in the protocol and they run the protocol and then in the end they get the output, right. So that is the plain model, no setup. Then we have a class of protocols where we use some public information which we call as common reference string or common random string. They are slightly distinct, but this is something which we assume that some trusted party has created it for us and it had distributed the CRS to all the parties in the beginning, and after that they start the protocol. Okay. So this setting is used to circumvent some impossibilities, but do not care for now, but there are protocols that are designed in such settings. Okay. And the last one is called private setting. Here, apart from the public information called CRS, we also have a public key infrastructure, and by public infrastructure I mean that every party will be associated with a public key and the secret key pair. The public key will be known to everybody, but the secret key will be possessed by just that party. Okay. So this is what I mean by PKI. And as far as a network setting is concerned with, again to repeat, all the parties are connected by point-to-point pairwise channels which are secure and authenticate. authenticated, and apart from that we have a broadcast channel. Okay, so this is the assumption we have. And what is a broadcast channel? And again, this is what I am doing is a broadcast. Okay, this is whatever I am broadcasting, I am saying you all are listening the same thing. It's not that you are listening something and C is listening something else. Okay, so I have a mechanism, a broadcast channel, using which every party in the system in fact can send some information identically to all the parties. And broadcast again can be realized using Byzantine agreement, which has been covered in the previous lecture. Okay, so now that I introduced you this best of both world protocols, so let's motivate why we need this new class of MPC protocols. There was honest majority protocols, there was dishonest majority protocols. Why do we need this new class of protocols? Okay, so the first reason is that in reality we may not know how the adversary is going to strike the system, whether it can corrupt majority of the parties or minority of the parties. We are not sure about it. Okay, so if there was no best of both world protocols in the literature and you have just these two kind, honest majority and the dishonest majority, as a practitioner what are you going to do? If you have a situation where you have to employ an MPC protocol, what are you going to do? You are just going to pick a protocol from one kind. Let's say you pick an honest majority protocol and employ that, okay, and then wish you best of luck, right? And indeed, if the adversary could corrupt minority of the parties, you will be fine. But what happens if the adversary could manage to corrupt majority of the parties? Okay, this is what happens. Something will happen, disastrous. It's a disastrous situation, because it is the same disaster that happens when penguins are banished from their natural habitat. They are sent to desert, and the camels are banished from desert and they are sent to the polar region. Okay, see, both these species, camel and penguin, they are very well equipped to take care of the challenges in their respective habitats. It's not that they live in a very benign environment, right? Polar region as well as desert, they have different kind of challenges, but they are complementary in nature. That's important, right? So if you send penguins to desert and the camels to polar region, they are simply going to perish. The same thing happens with our protocols in the honest and the dishonest majority protocol. So yes, unfortunately these protocols completely break down in the respective in the complementary setting. So you take an honest majority protocol and run it in a dishonest majority setting, then the protocol is no longer private and correct. On the other hand, if you take a dishonest majority protocol, then even when a single party is corrupt maliciously, you cannot get guaranteed output delivery or fairness, let alone minority corruption. Okay. It's a dishonest majority protocol, right? So the best it can give is unanimous abort, and it will continue to give that even when there is a single corruption. So yes, the other applications in the real world, we have a lot of applications of MPC like I have mentioned. I'll just pick up two: voting and federated learning. These are very hot applications of today, and in these applications privacy violation is a complete no, right? And that means that most likely you are going to pick up a dishonest majority protocol, right? But then dishonest majority protocols cannot give you stronger security notions like fairness and guaranteed output delivery. Right. So in that case, what will happen is that the adversary has a choice at his end, right? When it sees, let's say in case of voting, when it sees some result, right, the unanimous abort protocols are already unfair. So the adversary can always see the output, and then it can decide whether the result is favorable to him or not. And based on that, it will allow the protocol to succeed. If it sees the result is not as per his or her wish, then it can simply behave in a way that the protocol aborts, meaning the honest parties do not get the output. So you have to rerun the protocol again, and it can happen several number of times. The adversary can use all those intermediate results for something really bad, let's say rigging in case of voting. So we should aim for some solution which is where the privacy is maintained always, no matter what, how the adversary is going to behave, how the adversary is going to strike, honest majority or the dishonest majority way, doesn't matter. The privacy will always be there, but you will get guaranteed output delivery or fairness as much as theoretically or feasible, right? When you have honest majority, then you will get it. Of course, when there is dishonest majority, we can't do anything. There is a result that proves that you cannot achieve that stronger security notion. But when it is possible, at least at that time, we should be able to achieve that. And so for all these cases, I mean all practical applications, I think best of both worlds is the right notion to follow. We should use protocols that achieve the security notion. Okay, now that we are motivated enough, so let's talk about when such protocols are possible. Okay, what kind of resilience we can achieve. Okay, so let us assume that, so from now onwards T will refer to the threshold that we want to tolerate in the honest majority world, okay, and S is the threshold that we want to tolerate in the dishonest majority world. Okay, so these are the two corruption thresholds. T is the one that we want to tolerate in the honest majority, and S is the one that we want to tolerate in the dishonest majority world. So ideally, what would we like? If there are n parties and T and S are as I defined, we want the protocol to achieve guaranteed output delivery when T is less than n by 2, that's honest majority, and the unanimous abort, which is the best in the dishonest majority world, when S is less than n, right? That's dishonest majority setting. But unfortunately, there is a negative result known from those papers, again Yuval, Yal and co-authors, and of course there is an independent work by Jonathan Cards as well. So they show that if you want to achieve really the best of both worlds, that is guaranteed output delivery in the honest majority and unanimous abort in the dishonest majority, then this is the criteria that you have to satisfy. Otherwise, no polynomial time protocol exists. Of course, we are interested in polynomial time protocols, and therefore we need this restriction. And what is the restriction? Again, S is the number of parties that you want to tolerate in the dishonest majority world, and T is the threshold that you want to tolerate in the honest majority world. Then we need n to be strictly greater than S plus T. Okay. So the impossibility result that they have, that works for the case when n is equal to less than equal to n plus T, right. So that is what we need. Now the question is, can we not achieve the ideal feasibility? This is the ideal condition that we want to achieve, right? Can we not achieve that? We can achieve that in several ways. Okay, there are 4 ways that I know of, and which is what I am going to tell you. One is that if we can relax the notion of security in the honest majority world from guaranteed output delivery to fairness, then you can achieve the ideal feasibility. Okay, and this is why we consider the second class that I have mentioned, right, with this relaxation. There is another way we can circumvent this restriction, which is that now this time the relaxation comes in the dishonest majority world. In the dishonest majority setting, if we can leak several evaluation of the same function where the adversary is allowed to change his input. The honest parties' inputs are same, but the corrupt parties' inputs can be changed, and if all the parties including the adversary is allowed to get in fact S plus 1 evaluation of the same function, with varying input of the corrupt parties, then again we can achieve the ideal feasibility. There is another one, but let me not go into the details of it. It's slightly difficult to explain. The last one, the last way out is that if we are happy to tolerate only semi-honest or passive adversary in the dishonest majority world, then also it is fine. We can achieve the ideal feasibility. Okay. So what I am saying is that in the honest majority world, you still tolerate malicious adversary, but in the dishonest majority world, if you are happy to tolerate semi-honest adversary, even in that case you can achieve the ideal feasibility. Okay. So these are the 4 ways that we can bypass this impossibility. Okay, now that we have the big picture, so I am going to show you one construction. You have the definition of best of both worlds. So let us see one construction of this new class of protocol. Okay. So what I am going to do is, I am going to put together a few building blocks. Okay, I am going to make a very nice recite, and in the end you will see a best of both world protocol. Of course, I am not a foodie, so let us take colors. So I will take 3 different colors and then splash it in a certain way on a white paper, and then you will see a beautiful picture in the end. In reality, what I am going to discuss is actually something very, very interesting. I am going to tell you about a compiler. So what does compiler mean? That I am going to take certain kind of protocols satisfying some properties. Okay, and then I am going to use some extra tools, and then I am going to give you out something new. Okay, so for this case I am going to rely on a dishonest majority protocol, any dishonest majority protocol. Okay, so you can think of one of the protocols that Peter explained. You do not have to go into the details of that protocol, but just assume that you have a dishonest majority protocol, right? And on top of that, I am going to use 2 more tools. One is secret sharing, which is, again, you have seen it in 2 of the lectures. I am going to use Samir's secret sharing, so that's going to be a repetition. And surprisingly, I am also going to reuse what Peter talked about, information theoretic message authentication codes, MACs. In fact, the same MAC that he had talked about, and all this explanation, all this proof, I will simply just borrow. That's why I have it here. So I am going to use these extra 2 tools, secret sharing and message authentication code, and I am going to compile the any dishonest majority protocol to a best of both world protocol. However, this best of both world protocol is not going to satisfy the topmost notion that I have explained, God and unanimous about, but it is actually going to satisfy the second one, the relaxed one, slightly relaxed one, where in the honest majority we will get fairness, and in the dishonest majority we will get unanimous about. Okay, so that's the, and I will also show that this particular compilation also satisfies very beautiful property, namely, if we have a start with a D round dishonest majority protocol, right, then this compilation will give you D plus 1 round best of both world protocol. That means I am going to need just 1 more round on top of the dishonest majority protocol. So whatever your dishonest majority protocol takes, that plus 1 will be the round complexity of my best of both world protocol. Okay. So let's start with the building blocks. I am going to repeat all the stories. Probably this is going to give you more clarity on the tools. So the first tool is N, T threshold secret sharing. Quickly, in a secret sharing scheme, you have a dealer with a secret, and secret sharing scheme will have 2 phases, sharing and the reconstruction phase. In the sharing phase, the dealer is going to distribute the secret amongst these N participants in a way that later in the reconstruction phase, if T plus 1 or more parties come together, they will be able to get the secret. On the other hand, if T or less parties come together with their shares, then they will have absolutely no clue about the secret. Yeah, so yes, yes, I'll do that. Yeah. Yeah, so the first property that I have mentioned is of privacy or the secrecy. So what that means is that any T parties will have no information about the secret. Specifically, we can make a statement like the probability that a specific secret S is the secret, right, before the secret sharing is done is equal to the probability that that secret is the secret after the adversary sees the T shares. So basically what I am saying is that before the secret sharing has been done, the T corrupt parties will have absolutely no information, nothing, right. So at that point of time, whatever is the probability to guess a secret will remain unchanged even after they get the shares. Yeah, so this I have already mentioned that if T plus 1 or more parties come together, they should be able to reconstruct the secret, and that's the correctness. So these are the two properties we would like to have from N, T secret sharing, and we get both from the famous scheme by Samir. So let's explain the sharing phase. That's the dealer on the left side with the secret. To share the secret, it picks a polynomial of degree at most T. At most T. So first of all, assume that we are working on an algebraic field, okay, and the only restriction that I have is the size of the field should be more than the number of participants, the number of parties who will be holding the shares. That's the only restriction I have. Yes, so on holding the secret, the dealer picks a polynomial of degree at most T such that the constant term of the polynomial is the secret, okay. And then there are these publicly known n points alpha 1 to alpha n, the ith one meant for the ith party, right. These are all public information, alpha 1 to alpha n, everyone knows about it. Now the dealer is going to simply evaluate the polynomial at these points and hand over those evaluated points to the respective parties. So the polynomial is evaluated at alpha 1, and let's say the evaluation is share 1, and that's the share that the first party receives. Similarly, the polynomial is evaluated at alpha 2 and so on, and in the end the first share goes to the first party, second share goes to the second party, and so on. Okay, that is it. That's the sharing phase, as simple as this. Okay, now that's the sharing phase done. We are into the reconstruction phase. What do? It's even more simpler. All the parties simply disclose their respective shares. Okay. And what do you do to reconstruct? You simply interpolate, okay, using Lagrange's interpolation, and then you get the polynomial and therefore the secret, because the constant term of the polynomial is the secret. Right. So let me just quickly demonstrate with specific parameters. Let's say there are 3 parties and we want to tolerate 1 corruption, so the threshold is 1. So what are you going to do with that? So that's a secret, and what are we going to do is we are going to pick a random straight line. So polynomial of degree at most 1, because 1 is the threshold, right? And then we are going to simply evaluate, and since there are 3 parties, we have to get 3 evaluations, and then we just distribute 3 points on that. For reconstruction, it's enough to get 2 points. You can, with 2 points, you can simply reconstruct back a straight line, which is a 1 degree polynomial. For privacy, if we are given a single point, we have to argue that, right, the probability of guessing the secret before the sharing and after the sharing remains the same. You can see that given just 1 point, right, so if just 1 party is corrupt, then you can never know what's the straight line and therefore what's the secret, right. we can use a formally based theorem and we can prove exactly what I said, the concrete, the exact statement, the formal statement. But let's not go into that. Now I'm going to introduce this is the first primitive that I'm going to need, secret sharing, very simple. The second one is the MAC, message authentication code. So let me just tell you why I need it. Recall that we are tolerating a malicious adversary, not a passive or inactive semi-honest adversary, right? So an adversary, let's say the first party is maliciously corrupt, right? So in the reconstruction phase, what it can do is it can simply broadcast or reveal a point which is different from the original one, right? So the original point was the green one, but let's say he has chosen to broadcast this red point, right? Now if there are not enough redundancy in the system, if there are not enough number of good shares, then there is no way we can detect whether this red point is a bad point. To everybody, to be specific, to the honest parties, it will look like a bunch of points and they will simply try to fit a polynomial, right? And of course they are going to get probably a polynomial of degree more than t, but they have absolutely no clue which point is the bad point, which is not the correct one. So in order to tackle this scenario, we are going to need MACs, message authentication codes. So these are certain kind of certificates. For now, let's assume that there is a trusted trusted party who can issue such certificates. And what does the certificate contain? The certificate contains basically a proof of correctness or sanity. It's a statement that this green point is correct. So by the way, what is it? Do you know what is it? Some kind of script, but do you have any idea? No, not that one. Close by. You don't have to go to Egypt. This is a Indus Valley script. Okay, so the MACs are basically some kind of certificates you can think of written in coded language, which can be verified by some specific party. Let's say if this party can read the Indus Valley script, only then he can read that certificate, right? And this party, he doesn't know how to read an Indus Valley script, right? So if he changes either the green point or the certificate, right, tweaks that without knowing the meaning, without knowing how to read the script, then with very high probability he will change the content of this MAC and he is going to be caught by this guy, right? So yeah, so that's called MAC, and the part that the verifier will hold is called key. We can prepare multiple certificates, and this time I have hieroglyphics for you. You can prepare that in that language, and you can assume that the other verifier can only read that. And again, because the party who holds the MAC or the certificate doesn't know how to decode it, he will not be able to change it meaningfully, right? So that's the unforgeability property that Peter was mentioning. Okay, that's the unforgeability property. So how do you instantiate a MAC? It's basically this, exactly this, what Peter explained, but let me just repeat. So again, working over a field, and this time over a relatively large field, because we have to maintain the error probability, the probability of forgery low, we have to work on a larger field. But assume there is a field, and then the key is a random straight line. So this A and B, which is the key, you can think it of a straight line. The straight line is AX plus B, right? And the MAC is nothing but evaluation of the straight line at the shared point, at the point, the share, that is share 1. So I'm trying to build a MAC for, I'm trying to build a MAC for the first share, right? Share 1. So the MAC is nothing but the straight line evaluated at share 1. That's it. So unpurgeability holds because of the proof that he has explained. With 1 by f probability, everything will be fine. That is this party will not be able to cheat. Okay, so now before I proceed to the protocol, by the way, everybody can pick their own key. I mean, the keys are going to be different straight lines with different parties, and the same point may have multiple MACs with respect to different straight lines. Okay, so with these two tools, we are ready to construct the protocol. But just before that, I want to quickly introduce the concept of round, which already had been explained, but let me quickly repeat, and the rushing adversary, which is a stronger kind of adversary. So round means, so rounds are equivalent to clock cycles. Okay, every clock cycle, every party, they are going to talk, listen and compute. Talk means they are going to communicate to all the other parties. Listen means they are going to receive the communication from the other parties, and then followed by some local computation that they will do, right. So this they are going to do repetitively in every round. So the protocols will proceed in terms of rounds. There will be several rounds, and each round, this is what every party is going to do: talk, listen and compute. Okay. Now by rushing adversary, so this is what the honest parties are going to do. They are going to religiously follow this sequence. But an adversary may not do that. Specifically, a rushing adversary can first choose to listen, right, and then compute and then send in a particular round, right. So it can first listen what the honest parties are sending it, and based on that it can change its strategy and can send the information to the other parties. Okay. So it's adaptive in that sense, but this is called rushing adversary. So we are going to tolerate such adversaries. It's quite practical. We are going to tolerate such adversaries. Okay, so let's now build the compiler. Okay. Again, what is the goal? So we are going to use a dishonest majority protocol, any dishonest majority protocol for that matter. We are going to use it as a black box, and then we are going to use these additional tools of secret sharing and MACs, right? And then we are going to get a new protocol which is best of both worlds in category, and it's going to give you fairness in the honest majority world and unanimous in the dishonest majority protocol. And interestingly, if the unanimous about protocol in the dishonest majority setting is of R rounds, then this protocol, the new protocol, the compiled protocol, is going to be just R plus 1 rounds. That is all. So that's my dishonest majority protocol that I am relying on. Okay, so that's a black box. It's given to us, we can use it. So what I am doing is, I am using this dishonest majority protocol to compute. So all the parties are here, the same parties that want to participate in the best of both world protocol. So they will participate in a dishonest majority protocol with their inputs. Now instead of computing the output according to the function that we have at hand, right, we have a function at hand which we want to compute. Instead of computing that function, what we compute is a secret sharing of that function, and secret sharing with respect to a threshold t. So we have seen n comma t secret sharing, some is secret sharing. So we are going to compute t sharing of the output, and it is not just secret sharing, but it's an authenticated secret sharing. Okay, what do I mean by an authenticated secret sharing? This is what I mean. So this is so let's say y is supposed to be the output of the function that we want to compute, right. Now we are using the dishonest majority protocol to compute a secret sharing, t sharing of the output, and let's say y1, y2 up to y5. Let's assume we have just 5 parties, so these are the shares, y1 to y5 are the shares of the output. Now this is plain secret sharing, and by authenticated I mean the following: every share is now authenticated using a MAC with respect to every other party. Okay, so the first, look at the first share y1. It has a MAC, so P1 holds a MAC with respect to a key held by party P2. It has another MAC with respect to party P3, another one with respect to P4, and so on. Okay, and the same thing is done with respect to all the shares. Okay. Now every party would hold their share of the output, max with respect to every other party, and keys with respect to the max of everybody else. Okay. So that's the whole thing, is the output of my dishonest majority protocol, right? And yes, as before, that's the form of the MAC that I am using for now. So let's look at this. So these green things, these green boxes are my MACs. I have that for every party. So P1, Y1 has MAC with respect to every other party, right? There are 4 other parties, so if he has MACs with respect to every other party, similarly for other parties. So that's the output of my dishonest majority protocol. Now that's already our rounds, consumed our rounds, because we assumed that our dishonest majority protocol takes our rounds. Now I'm going to run another round where every party simply going to broadcast. This is where I'm using broadcast. They're simply going to broadcast their respective shares and the max. They can keep the keys with them. Okay. So they're going to broadcast their share and the max publicly. Now you can simply complete the protocol in the following way. Every party will consider every share, right, with respect to the keys that it holds, right, and it's going to check with respect to the max. So whichever share passes the test, the MAC test, is going to consider those shares. If it has enough number of good shares, verified good shares, enough means the threshold is how much? The threshold is T, right? In this case, I have 5 parties, and what is T, by the way? T is a threshold for the honest majority world, right? If I have 5 parties, what could T be? 2, right? So therefore the secret sharing has been done with respect to threshold 2, and now by enough number of share I mean 3, because by the correctness of summary secret sharing we know that if we have 3 points on the polynomial, then I should be able to recover the polynomial, and all these points are going to be correct because I have checked with respect to my key, right? So that's the protocol. That's the end of the protocol. Now we have to verify whether it is indeed a best of both world protocol. That is, when there is a minority corruption, that is at most 2 parties are corrupt, then we should be able to get fairness. And on the other hand, if there are majority corruption, that is, let's say there are 3 corruption, then we should get unanimous abort. So let's check that one by one. So let's first consider the honest majority case. Let's assume that we have 2 corruption, okay, and for simplicity let us assume that the first 2 parties are corrupt, P1 and P2, they are the corrupt parties, okay. And since that the underlying protocol is a dishonest majority protocol, you can have 2 cases, right? It will provide you unanimous abort security. There are 2 cases. What are the 2 cases? In the first case, assume that all the honest parties have got the output, right? We will consider the other case where they have not got the output. There is a possibility because it's an unanimous abort protocol, and there is a possibility that the honest parties may be completely deprived of the output. So let's consider the first case when the honest parties have received the output, and the output in this context is nothing but the share and the max, right? So what happens in this case? All the 3 honest parties have their output from the dishonest majority protocol. If they broadcast, then no matter how the remaining 2 corrupt parties are going to behave, right, these 3 shares that you have, they will always be verified correctly by the rest of the honest parties and will be considered for interpolation. And therefore every honest party will be having all these 3 points, and they can use them for Lagrange's interpolation for the summary secret sharing, the reconstruction, and they can get back the output. So in this case everybody gets the output, right? So this is fine, this is what we want, fairness, everybody gets the output. Now let's consider the complementary case that I have mentioned. It may happen that the dishonest majority protocol, in the dishonest majority protocol, the honest parties did not end up with the output. So they have received nothing they have received. And in this case, you can see that no matter again what the corrupt parties do, nobody will be able to compute the output, because the corrupt parties do not have enough number of shares of the output, right? Together they hold at most 2 shares on the polynomial, right? And we have used 2 sharing, and therefore the corrupt parties with their own shares will not be able to recover the output, and therefore it's the none situation, nobody gets the output. That means in the honest majority world, you can see that we have received, we have achieved fairness, because either everybody or none of them received the output. So everything is good in the honest majority setting. So let's analyze the same protocol in the dishonest majority setting. Okay. So in the dishonest majority setting, we have to assume that there are at least 3 corruptions. Okay. Let's assume the last 3 parties are corrupt. Out of 5 parties, we have 3 of them corrupt. So that's dishonest majority. And again, we will have 2 cases, right? Because the underlying protocol gives you unanimous abort. Honest parties would either receive the output or they may not, but they will have unanimity again. So let's start with the case when the honest parties did not receive the output from the underlying protocol, right? Whereas the corrupt parties, all 3 of them, they have received the output. Now what happens in this case? The bad parties, they can always themselves can reconstruct the output. Why? Because they have enough number of shares, Y3, Y4 and Y5, right? With the 3 shares, they can easily reconstruct the output. But what happens to the honest parties? Okay, so we can think of different strategies, but let's assume the protocol is like this, that if the honest party receives bot from the underlying protocol, then they continue to output bot, because even for the outer protocol, for the best of the both world, in this setting, we would aim for on unanimous abort. So it's fine as long as in this case, the honest parties are on the same page, right? So if they have received bot from the underlying protocol, they know that the underlying protocol gives unanimity, and therefore if they continue to output bot, the unanimity will be still retained, right? So in this case, you can see that the honest parties continue to output bot, and this is still unanimous abort, but the corrupt parties, they have received the output. Violated fairness, fine, because in the dishonest majority protocol, in the dishonest majority world, the best we can get is unanimous abort, and which is what we have achieved in this case. So let's now consider the last case, which is that assume that the underlying protocol was such that everybody got the output. The corrupt parties of course got the output, but in this case the honest parties also received the output. So honest parties will simply broadcast, they will follow the protocol in the last round, in the R+1th round, and they will simply broadcast and do whatever usual stuff they are supposed to do. But now let us take this adversarial strategy. So the corrupt parties, let's say they are going to pollute the MAC just corresponding to party P1, whereas the remaining MACs they do not touch, they just keep it as such. Okay. Now let's say this is the strategy that they are following. What happens? If you look at party P1, what happens? So for P1, he will have Y1 correctly verified, Y2 as well, because these 2 MACs will be fine. Of course, Y1 is his own share, it's fine. Y2 also is fine because this MAC is with respect to P1 and that is untouched, and then P1 will find this share also is correct. But whereas for Y3, Y4 and Y5, P1 is going to level all of them as invalid because all these MACs are polluted, they have been changed, and therefore P1 will conclude that these shares are not correct, right. So, in his set of correct or valid shares, he will have just two shares, y1 and y2, and with that it cannot get the output, right, and therefore P1 is going to output bot. But on the other hand, if you look at P2, right, for P2 he will of course identify y1 and y2 as the correct valid shares, but apart from that he will also get y3, y4 and y5 as the correct shares, because these max, the max corresponding to P2 has not been changed, right. So, for him he gets all the 5 shares and he can interpolate back the polynomial and can get y. Now, what is it? Something wrong happened, right? This protocol is not satisfying unanimity. One honest party is outputting bot nothing, the other honest party is getting the output. So, we have to fix this, and fortunately we can do this by replacing the MAC that we had been using, the pairwise MAC, with something else, okay. So, if you look at carefully the previous MAC that we had used, it has this pairwise property, right. Every MAC is with respect to one private party, right. Only that party using his private key can check the sanity of the MAC and the value, right, and that result will not be known to the other parties, because other party will have a different key, different MAC to verify. So, this adversary will have the opportunity to corrupt one MAC with respect to one party, whereas keep the other MACs intact. So, one honest party will find the value correct, whereas the other honest parties will find the same value to be incorrect, because the MACs had been polluted accordingly. Okay. So, what we are going to do is we are going to have a combined MAC which will be verified by all the parties. So, that means that all the parties will be on the same page, either whether the MAC verified or not, everyone will have the same thing. So, we are going to replace the previous MAC with this kind of global MAC, and then everything will be fine. So, if the adversary tries to attack in the same fashion that I have mentioned, so now with this new MAC he cannot touch the individual MACs separately. If he touches, he has to change the entire MAC, and then everybody will know that that share is bad. So, I am just going to show you quickly what is the difference. The new MAC is also in very simple. So, for instance, so I am trying to build a MAC for this last share, the last value. So, the MAC is nothing but a polynomial of degree t, where the constant term of that polynomial is the value for which you want to prepare the MAC, and the key is nothing but a random value from a field, and again this field needs to be larger so that our error probability is negligible, and the evaluation of this polynomial, the MAC polynomial, at that secret point. So, these values are secret and held by these parties, and so this polynomial is the MAC, and this key or the value is secret evaluation point, and the evaluation of this MAC on that polynomial is the key. Okay. So, I will not have time to explain why that was, but it is a simple probability calculation that you can work out to show that again it holds the property of unforgeability. That is, if you change this polynomial or this value, then all the parties are going to catch that something wrong has been happened. Either the point has been changed, either the share has been changed, or the polynomial, the MAC polynomial, has been changed with very high probability. That can be proven. Yeah, so I think I am running out of the time, but I think this is the main content that I wanted to present. But just to tell you that the kinds of work that is happening in this area is that there are plenty of other results. In this work, which is done along with my students Debya and Swati, so we look at the round complexity of best of both world protocols, and to be precise exact round complexity, and I mentioned what the round complexity is, and these are simply figures which I don't have much time, but so these are the round complexity of dishonest majority protocol, and that table is for honest majority protocols, and we have almost settled the round complexity of the best of both world protocols, right? And there are a lot of interestingly we have several lower bounds and upper bounds in the paper, but I'm not going to go into the details of that paper. This is just to show you, give you a glimpse of what kind of works that are happening in the best of both world setting. And I guess I'm going to, so one message that I want to just give from this slide, and I'm not going to explain everything. The message is that so we are relying on the dishonest majority protocols. So we have these two distinct classes of protocols, and then we want that third and unconventional class, namely best of both world protocols. So if you look at the round complexity tables, you will see that the round complexity requirement of best of both world category is not too much demanding. So for instance, if you look at this row, right over here, so this is the guaranteed output delivery in the honest majority and the unanimous about in the dishonest majority. That's the kind of protocol that we were talking about here, and this is a slight relaxation. If you look at these two tables, you will see that the round requirement of the best of both world category is just one more than the requirement in the dishonest majority setting. And actually the upper bound that I have shown, the protocol that I have discussed, is the upper bound for this case. Okay, so we start with a dishonest majority protocol, right, and then we need another round and we get a best of both world protocol. And since you have a dishonest majority protocol satisfying these many rounds, we can simply plug in. So this is why I was saying that the protocol that I discussed is a compiler. You start with a protocol in a black box way, and then you enhance it to get another kind of protocol. So you can simply plug in the best protocol in the dishonest majority setting, giving this round complexity in our compiler, and then you will immediately get protocol of best of both world category. And not just that, you will actually be able to achieve this round complexity, this optimal round complexity. Okay, right. So I think I'm going to conclude with that, and that's it. Thank you.
Why does abort lead to identification of the adversary?
No, it doesn't lead to identification automatically. You have to enhance your protocol to achieve that property.
Also, so you talked about Lagrange's
Interpolation,
right? So, but that is possible only if the number of shares are equal to at least t, right?
T plus 1.
Okay.
So you just think of a straight line, right? It's a 1 degree polynomial, and you are going to need 2 points on it to get back the polynomial. Yeah.
So I have a question. So the dishonest majority MPC, are you using it in a black box fashion? Because it's not necessary that it will always output authenticated to sharing. So for instance, if I take the speeds protocol, the output of the speeds protocol will be the output value in the additive shared fashion, and the MAC is a global MAC.
No, just think of speeds protocol is used to compute some functionality, right?
Yeah.
If so, my functionality is this.
So your functionality also take the MAC keys as the input.
Yeah,
for the,
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
Okay.
Or you can sample that also inside the functionality. But finally, the output is what I want, the authenticated to sharing. No, I think you have to keep. That's it? Okay.